Okay, I'm Hal Pepper with the Center for Profitable Agriculture, and we're really glad to have everyone joining us today on this webinar. I would like to ask everyone if you would please mute your microphone so that we don't have any extra noise today. Today's topic in this Growing Sales at Farmers Market webinar series is data-driven advocacy, communicating the value of your market. And we're grateful to have Nancy Staisey from the Historic Lewes Farmers Market joining us as today's instructor. Still hearing a little background noise. If you would please check your mic and be sure that that's muted for us. We greatly appreciate the support that is provided by USDA Rural Development and the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, as well as the Tennessee Association of Farmers Markets to help make this series possible. And to help report the impact of this webinar, I'd like to ask you to complete a very brief online evaluation at the end of today's session. The link of the evaluation will be posted in the chat box at the end of today's webinar. And even if you completed the evaluation after yesterday's webinar, I hope that you will go in there and complete the evaluation again today. If you would be sure to enter your name and your location into the chat box, that will help us record attendance. And please note that attendance at all 4 webinars, the one yesterday, today, tomorrow, and Friday, will fulfill a Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program requirement in the agritourism, fruit and vegetable, and value-added producer diversification sectors. So that we can provide a complete report of your attendance for TDA for the Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program, please type in your name in the chat box as it appears on TDA's list. And if you're joining us today by phone, please let Erica Alexander at TDA know that you joined by phone by emailing her at erica.alexander@tn.gov. We encourage you to use the chat box at any time during the session to submit a question or make a comment. You can send that to everyone so they can see it, or you can send it to someone privately. We will be monitoring the chat box during the presentation, and Nancy will be checking that as we will to see your questions and comments. Please note that I'm recording today's session, and we'll plan to post it online so that you'll have that to go back and look at or to share it with somebody else. Originally, we scheduled a series of workshops for farmers market managers for this week, but due to COVID-19, we decided to make the workshop into a webinar series. And I'm really excited to have Nancy Staisey with us today, even though she was planning to come down and participate in several workshops across Tennessee. She did a great job yesterday with her webinar, and we look forward to the one that she has today. She's passionate about using data and information to improve things. She's a board member of the Historic Lewes Farmers Market, and her session today will help you explain the value of shopping locally, and will cover an approach for communicating the value of your farm or your farm products or your farmer's market to customers and to your community. Nancy grew up on a small farm, and she has a PhD from Carleton University, focusing on statistics and methodology. And we're looking forward, Nancy, to your presentation today on communicating the value of farms, farm products, and farmers markets. And I understand you plan to spend some time talking about COVID-19 resources, and that you have a guest with you, Helene Harris, president of the Lewes Farmers Market. So we'll let you introduce her and begin your session now.
Great. Thanks, Hal, and hello to everyone. I'm going to begin with two true confessions. The first is I actually didn't grow up on a farm. I spent summers and weekends helping on my grandfather's farm. So uh, 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 I guess my the dirt was under my nails only half the time I was growing up. The second true confession is something I'll own up to right up front, and that is that I love numbers. I love the way that when you look at numbers, I feel that I'm dealing with facts. I love the way that you can analyze them and feel that you're kind of inching closer to the truth. Um, but I also know that everyone doesn't agree with me in terms of this love of numbers, and that the word number contains the word numb. And I realize that many people, well, maybe even most people, find numbers to be mind-numbingly boring. So with that in mind, what I'm going to do is I want to share how these supposedly boring numbers that we all collect on our markets or on our farms can in fact be used as a fuel that can drive us to compelling insights about the value of our markets, and also how we can, how with these insights, you can develop memorable value stories to share. But first, let me introduce our market. And I just got a weird thing up on my screen there, sorry. We are the oldest and largest producer-only market in Delaware. If you were with me yesterday, I already said quite a bit about the market, but I think we have some new people joining today, so I do want to still introduce it again. And when I say producer-only market, this means that the farmers and the producers who sell at our market can only sell what they actually grow or produce. In addition, we limit the amount of prepared food at our market. Now, we're very lucky. We have currently over 100 volunteers who help us with the market. We're also a nonprofit, and we give back to the community in a lot of different ways. We provide scholarships to local farmers to attend conferences or courses. We provide local courses for farmers. For example, we've brought in J.M. Fortier, author of The Market Gardener, Ben Hartman, who's author of The Lean Farm, and Dan Kittredge, who speaks on soil bionutrients, and other authors or authorities to provide workshops for local farmers. And when I say local farmers, this is for any farmer in kind of what we call the Delmarva Peninsula, which is where we're located. And so you don't have to be a farmer selling at our market to get one of our scholarships or to attend one of these courses. We also provide educational presentations for the public on nutrition, food preparation, and the environment. We do chef demos, and we do meet the farmer sessions. In addition, we provide up to $20 of SNAP matching funds per market per customer. And this season, we're expanding our matching fund program to cover WIC and the seniors program. Of course, as you all know, with COVID-19, we're still trying to figure out how this season will exactly play out and work. Now, our market, our main market, our Saturday market operates from May to September, 8 a.m. to noon, and from October to November, 9 a.m. to noon. We have an additional Wednesday market that runs from May to August, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Now, I mentioned that we're located in southern Delaware on what we call the Delmarva Peninsula. It's called that because it's a peninsula. If you look at a map, you'll kind of see this peninsula. It goes out into the Atlantic a little bit, and at the northern part of it is Delaware, the middle part of it is Maryland, and the tip of it is Virginia, so it's Delmarva. We're in Lewes is a town of 3,000 people, but in the summer months of July and August, it and the surrounding area balloons to around 10,000 people. And this is because of tourism and our location, which is a couple miles from the beach. But in the end, we have seen that our market, it is really the key support for our market are local residents who regularly shop for their weekly groceries. And we are a rain or shine market. I think we've only, Helena's on, and she would know the exact number of times we've ever closed the market. We basically only ever close if it's a national emergency and the governor has issued a, do not drive on the roads kind of warning. In rain, our farmers may come and sell out of their trucks as opposed to setting up tables, but our customers arrive in their slickers and boots and with umbrellas and get their grocery shopping done. Now, our market is truly a community meeting place, and our new tagline is where fresh food is rooted in community. And we picked this tagline to try to capture that. As an aside, I should say our old tagline had been where being fresh is socially acceptable. We thought it was cute and clever, but in the wake of the Me Too movement, we saw how this could be misinterpreted and thought it prudent to change to a new tagline. But this isn't what our market looked like when we began it 15 years ago. Like a lot of farmers markets, we started out small and we grew over the years. We incorporated as a nonprofit in 2005 after 6 months of analyzing best practice markets, talking to their market managers, and developing our mission and a business plan. We also began to engage our community to build support for the market. Beginning in early 2006, we created a board of directors, found a location, and began fundraising. We started with 20 vendors signed up. One never showed up. One came 3 times, another came randomly, and another was a late season vendor. This led to our creating an operational plan and some rules for the market. Our first market opened at 8 a.m., and by 9:30, our vendors had totally sold out of product. I think our advertising on our prep work had been extremely effective. From there, we've grown year by year, but we've always held true to being a nonprofit, mission-focused, producer-only market. Now, in fact, our mission has informed just about everything we do. Our mission statement is, the HLFM provides a family-friendly community gathering place where consumers may purchase the freshest local foods available. It also provides alternative educational and marketing opportunities for emerging farmers and others to help create local and sustainable food systems that are environmentally sound, economically viable, and socially responsible, and which improve the variety, freshness, nutritional value, and distribution of fresh foods to the community. Wow, that's a mouthful. Our mission statement is probably a bit long, and it may not be perfectly stated, but it covers all the key points for us. And most importantly, it really serves as a guide for how we operate and develop the market. We began several years ago doing experiments at our market to find out what really works to increase sales. And I spoke about this yesterday. If you've missed it, I know it's going to be available online, and Hal can explain that at the end. But it was part of that work we were doing when we were conducting our experiments and really thinking about how we could grow the market, market it better, bring more people to the market. It was as we were doing that work that we realized that this mission that is so important to us, by and large, is not understood by our customers. Shoppers at our market, they arrive, they buy their groceries, and they go home, often with no awareness of how we're trying to influence sustainable farming, support emerging farmers, and ensure that everyone in our community has access to fresh local foods. We considered how we could do a better job of sharing our mission statement. But we quickly realized that spending a lot of time focusing on sharing our mission statement wouldn't necessarily help, because reading the mission doesn't tell you anything about how well or in what ways we're achieving that mission. So we decided to focus our energies instead on trying to communicate the value we deliver in a memorable way, as opposed to just communicating our mission statement, which quite frankly, I've never been able to memorize. I have to read it from the page. So what I wanted to cover this morning, first of all, is why it's especially hard to communicate the value of farmers markets, how most farmers markets are complex, interconnected systems, and then what we've learned about how you can use a very simple 4-step approach to create what we call data-driven stories that communicate the value of farmers markets. And each time I'm saying farmers markets, if you are on this call and are from a farm, the same thing is true of most farms. Now, because we're talking about data-driven advocacy, I'm going to spend some time up front on the data, but keep in mind, okay, spoiler alert, I will be driving to a conclusion in which our markets, data-driven advocacy or value story was shared on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. Now, because we're doing this in Zoom as opposed to in person, I'm going to pause periodically for questions. So if you have a question, please just type it in the chat box, and either I will see it or Hal will see it, and when we pause, we can try to address your questions. Let's begin by looking at the challenges, though. Markets look deceptively simple to run, but in fact are complex operations and typically operate in an even more complex community or this larger ecosystem. Now, for example, this means that if the mission of your market is economic development, your market may be only one of several approaches being used in your community to support development. Impact seen then could be claimed by many different groups. Similarly, markets often have many stakeholders. Since value, like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder, we all tend to have many audiences to address. And as I've already mentioned, the mission of your market usually isn't obvious to shoppers. Now, my market may be different than yours. In fact, it probably is, because in the end, I think probably each of our markets is unique in some way. Yours may be larger, it may be smaller, it may be located in a big city, it may be part of a system of markets, it may be operated by your city or your county, it may sell crafts as well as food, its mission may be different, all kinds of things may be unique about your market. It may focus on economic development or healthy living. But despite all of these differences, I think these challenges we all share, and that we would all like to be able to address the two things I'm going to be talking about today: communicating the value of your market to customers and making stories that are memorable. Now, we're very aware of being part of kind of this interconnected system driving supply and demand for local farm products. Now, as a nonprofit market, we provide educational presentations for the public, a story time for children, and that teaches the children, and in many cases their parents, where their food comes from. And I mentioned chef presentations that link local chefs with our local farmers. Now, all of these activities help to drive demand at our market and create a community meeting place where neighbors and tourists shop and talk together. On the supply side, we provide, as I mentioned, scholarships and workshops and do a lot of things that are open to any farmers in our region, again, whether they sell at our market or not. Now, we try to ensure a supply of fresh foods to those in need in our community in several ways. We accept SNAP benefits, WIC and seniors coupons. I mentioned the matching funds we provide. We also glean food at the end of the market and donate it to local charities, and are actually considering an approach where people could come and buy food at the market to donate in addition to what's being gleaned. Now, as part of our local food system, we aim to have an impact on protecting farmland, supporting new and established farmers, connecting our community with the hands that grow their food. However, like our mission, these impacts aren't always obvious to our shoppers. This morning, I want to focus on how we can help customers and stakeholders understand these impacts and appreciate the value of farmers markets. Now, our journey towards addressing these communication challenges began by looking at the data we collect. And it led us to create what we've called a data-driven advocacy or value stories. Now, we've been collecting a whole series of measures since our market began 15 years ago. We began collecting this data for operational purposes. For example, we've always collected data on attendance and on sales. Our farmers pay 6% of sales to support the market. So that reporting of sales was always kind of baked into the way we operate the market. We also collect some data on the programs we run, like the number of children at story time, the value of food donated, the value of scholarships given. When we began accepting SNAP at our market, this generated more data to collect. And then when we also began taking WIC and seniors, the data collection expanded. We also collect some data on our farmers, like the amount of land that's farmed, the distance traveled to the market. And in addition, we record some qualitative data, things like the weather on each market day, and we record if it's a holiday day. In addition, we take this data that we've collected and we use it to calculate additional measures, such as the dollars spent per customer per market, the SNAP spend per customer per market, and others. Now, these are useful calculated measures if you're interested in driving growth by getting existing customers to spend more, or if your strategy is to drive growth by attracting more customers who spend about the same amount at the market. Because we also record sales by stall, we can look at things like which stalls are growing their sales more quickly than the market as a whole. And it's enabled us to do some analyses that have been very helpful in the research that we've done on our market. Now, we initially began collecting that data because we knew it would help us with our operations. We needed sales and gate counts to monitor growth and manage the entrances. Then some of our farmers began asking for data to help them, and we realized that our sales numbers could help them assess their growth and identify historically high sales days when they should bring more to the market, or even just monitor how well their sales have been growing at our market. Then an aha moment when we realized that we could use all of this data we've been collecting to conduct research on our market. And as I mentioned, this is covered in the presentation that was done yesterday. But today, what I want to focus on is how we're using our data for advocacy and to more clearly communicate the value of our market. Now, before I go on, I thought I would pause for a moment to see if there are any questions. Who has access to the sales per stall? Great question. The only people who have access to it are us and a farmer or the owner of a stall has access to their own data, and we will give them their own data and we'll give them the summary data for the market as a whole so that they can see how they're doing against the market as a whole, but they cannot compare themselves to other specific vendors or to their competitors. We've never had problems with people, our vendors, not wanting to give the sales data to us because if you sell at our market, you have to give it to us because that's the way we charge you and you pay to be part of the market. So it's always the requirement if you're joining our market. And quite frankly, we've never had anyone really push back on that. This comes up as a question all the time, and I think because it's something that we've done from the beginning, it's never been an issue. Is us the board? John, could you say more about when I used us? When we're talking about the mission statement and, you know, we as a group kind of coming to this conclusion, it was basically the board. Oh, in answering the question about access to sales, um, the the us is really just the board, but really and truly, the only people who really look at the data by individual stalls would probably be about 3 people on the board. Um, it isn't something that we spend a lot of time. We're typically sharing with our full board the summary numbers. We do look at it sometimes as a board if we're considering the makeup of the market, and do we need, can we add another seller who sells, fill in the blank X. If we see that all the people who are selling, I'm just using this as a hypothetical, for example, if we see that we have several people selling eggs and they're doing well, but they don't, we don't see anybody running out of eggs each week, it's unlikely we'd add another egg seller. So in that way. So otherwise, that data is not publicly available. So just to the board, and individual sellers can see their data and the summary data. Any other questions before I move on? Okay, as I mentioned when we began, we came up with a 4-step approach to develop what we call data-driven advocacy or value stories about our market. So I'm going to begin with step 1, looking at all of the data. We initially thought that just sharing our data was enough. And this is a sign that we used to place at our entrances to our market. We still place a sign somewhat, we've modified this sign in terms of what we use now. We still place a sign, but it has a different content based on what we've learned. So this is a sign that we used to place at the entrances to our market. It's primarily a list of data on accomplishments we were proud of. And because the photo is a little bit hard to read, it's the left has typed out exactly what is shown on the sign. We thought this was useful, and it certainly gave all of us being the volunteers and the board, a great sense of accomplishment. But then we asked ourselves an important question that may have gone through our customers' minds for quite a while, and that is, so what? We gave over $32,000 in scholarships to farmers, but so what? Lots of people shopped at our market and spent lots of money, but so what? I mean, can you imagine going to a chain grocery store and seeing a sign saying that X thousands of people had shopped at the store and spent Y thousands of dollars? Wouldn't you be kind of puzzled by that? Many of the things we were bragging about would only be seen as accomplishments if you understood our mission and the value the market provides to our community. So this brings me to the next step, and that is the importance of context. So here are 2 statements, 2 data statements. Eggs from Twin Post Farm travel 60 miles to reach your plate, and food at our market travels an average of 27 miles to reach your plate. Interesting, but as my mother would say if she saw this, how many miles should eggs travel? When we were on the farm, they only traveled a few yards to get to our plate. But when you put the statement in context, that food at our market travels an average of 27 miles, but in context add that food at a grocery chain travels an average of 1,500 miles to reach your plate, it suddenly becomes more interesting. And also then add the implications of this. That in general, the farther your food travels, the less nutritious and less tasty it is. The fresher the food is, the longer it lasts. And suddenly, it's all more meaningful and becomes a customer-focused value statement. Now let's pull this together and look at step 3. And that's how to create a data-driven story that communicates insights you get from looking at the data, putting it in context, and then understanding the implications of it. So I'm going to work through another example. Beginning with the data, we know that farmers who sell at our market farm over 6,000 acres of land. Putting this in context and drawing out the implications of this, we know that 175 acres of agricultural land is lost to development per hour in the US. Now, the implication then is that by supporting our market's farmers, you help keep those 6,000 acres of local farmland in production. Now I'm going to add, in this case, a photo that tells the story. And the photo shows, on the left, shows a tract of local farmland in my community that is under development. In fact, if I took a picture from the same position right now, it would be a 2-story building that's been completed there. That's a medical arts building. Now, to people in our community, the picture alone tells a story because they know that the building right in front of their eyes is rising where corn grew just 1 year ago. And suddenly, these statistics about acres of agricultural land lost per hour to development become local and become personal. Here's another data, another story based on data. And this is a photo of the Fickner family. This is Justin and his grandmother, Loretta. And they sell at our market. When we were applying to renew our permit for the park where our market is located, Justin came in to speak in support of the renewal in front of our city council. Now, none of us had ever heard Justin speak publicly. We knew him as a very knowledgeable young man who farms and sold at the market. He stood up to speak, and then he described in a very compelling fashion how the market had influenced his decision to stay in farming and how it helped him see a future in farming. And now he will help keep his family farmland in production for another generation. And this is the 4th generation on his farm. Now, it's probably worth saying a few words about what makes for a good data-driven story. First and foremost, it should be true to your data. The best stories are local, and they can be confirmed by the target audience for your communications. Anyone in our community can see the farmland under development as they drive into or out of our town. Anyone who shops at our market can speak directly to Justin. In fact, many of our shoppers heard his story firsthand at the city council meeting. And it was interesting because afterwards, people came up to me and said, "I never really thought about the impact this has, your market has on local farmers and on farmland." The very best stories bring the data to life, they're compelling, and hopefully lead your audience to action. Now I'm going to pause another second here to get any questions. And I think someone needs to mute because there's kind of a scraping noise in the background. And there was a question from about how the data is reported. And Helene has answered this in the chat box, but I want to make sure everyone gets the answer to it. And that is, does each farmer give give a number to a specific person each week? Is it online, etc.? And the answer is they report their sales weekly to our operations manager in our office. Now, as soon as I say operations manager, I think it sounds like we have a large staff. We have 2 part-time staff. Most people send it in by email. A few of our farmers aren't that comfortable with email and make it a phone call. And then it gets entered into Google Sheets, and then I pull it off into Excel if I want to do analyses of it. Now, are there any other questions before I carry on? Or did I miss any further up? I think not. Okay. So back with what makes for a good data-driven story. a good data-driven story should stay with you. And my hunch is that 2 weeks from now, you probably won't remember that much about the data that I've talked about, but I think you may remember one or two stories that I may tell during this. There is an old American Indian saying, and it's, tell me the facts and I will learn. Tell me the truth and I will believe. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. And we're really looking for stories that in some way or another move people and occupy that space in a heart. Now, the final step is to craft a call to action. And this requires being clear on the actions you want. Now, I'd say in like more than 50% of the cases, our call to action is simply to support and shop at the market. We hope people to understand this. We hope when people understand our mission and our market, that it will make them more anxious to shop with us and more willing to hopefully spend more money with us. Now, let's walk through another example. We begin with the first 3 steps. We've provided over $32,000 in scholarships and grants to farmers to attend workshops and conferences. We hold regular Meet the Farmers demos at our market to educate our customers on the challenges farmers face. And this photo shows Henry Bennett doing a Meet the Farmer demo. Henry, I'm not sure what generation he is. He's on a century farm in Delaware. That his family began farming after they had been shipwrecked when they landed in Delaware. So we know we've shared the information about our scholarships and what we do to support farmers, but then we add some context. The average age of principal farm operators in the US is 58 years old. More than 31% of principal farm operators are 65 or older. Access to land is the #1 challenge young farmers face. So now let's look at how we went about finding some stories that really bring this data and this context to life. This is Taylor. He interned with one of the farmers who sells at our market, and he received scholarships 2 years in a row to attend conferences to expand his knowledge. Last year, he was able to obtain land and began selling from his farm at our market.
You know what? I don't have to do anything else, right? Is this going to move automatically?
Yeah, there's somebody talking.
Now, this is Kathleen. Many of our customers and our volunteers got to know her when she sold at our market. She spent several years farming rented land, and she invested an incredible amount of hard work improving the soil, dealing with weeds, and built a washing station on this rented land so that she could adequately prepare her product to bring to market. Then she lost her lease. All of her hard work would now benefit the landowner, and she'd be leaving it behind, including the washing station that she'd invested funds building. Starting over on newly leased land, she resolved to make sure that she could take some of her investments with her if she were to again lose the lease after several years. So rather than building another washing shed on the new land, she decided to create a washing station in a storage container that could be moved if she lost the land. Now, this involved a large upfront cost, though. So to fund the large upfront investment cost she needed for the container and to retrofit it, she turned to a crowdsourcing site for a loan. Now, after several days, she had raised a few $100s, but was still far short of her goal. When we heard about this, we sent a note to our email list about her loan request. And in this case, our call to action was very clear. fund her loan. Within 2 days, she secured the full funding and attributes it to our market community's response to the email we sent out. So why do we share these stories? What's our call to action based on them? Well, the call to action varies based on the audience. In this case, when we're communicating these stories to our customers, our call to action is shop at our market to help create the next generation of farmers, save local farmland, and ensure access to local fresh foods. When we're sharing these stories with farmers, we want them to understand that we're a nonprofit. We're more than a market. We're here to create a community of support for local sustainable agriculture that they can use. Now, before I share one last example, it's worthwhile spending a little time on some of the practical aspects of developing your own value stories. Now, most of us have some data on our markets, and we've used, however, multiple sources to identify the context and implications of our data. And these include context statements that you can get from Farmers Market Coalition, which has a lot of infographics and good information at their site, Census of Agriculture data, published national survey results, and more. We've used some local survey results. It's important, though, to consider the audience for your value stories, since your call to action and the selection of the story to share is going to vary based on your audience and what they're interested in. One other consideration is how you share your stories. We've shared our stories at our volunteer appreciation luncheon. And I have to say, I think when people come to that luncheon now, they're looking forward to hearing a story about impacts or what the market does. We've shared stories when we've gone before City Council to renew our park permit. And we've shared stories with elected officials. Finally, it's important to remember that language matters. The details and truth matters, and confidentiality matters. Every story that I've shared with you has been cleared, and the photos have been cleared with the people who appear in them. We would never think of sharing a story and revealing, even the first name of someone without first talking to them. Now, I wanted to say a few words about infographics, because a place that many people go after you have data and you look at implications and you're trying to quickly share a story is infographics. It's a very popular way to tell your story. It's a visual representation of information and data that's intended to present information quickly and clearly. Now, good ones are usually visually well designed, they tell a story, they're easy to understand, and most importantly, they should make the message and the numbers easier to remember. So here I've picked a really, really simple one out to put on the side here. Agriculture employs more than 6 times as many workers as the US automotive industry. And you just look at this and you see the 6 tractors, and actually, I would have made the car a little smaller to be more the size of each tractor. It sticks in your mind, that difference. However, to create a good infographic and to create an effective one, you need to be clear on your audience, your message, and you should make sure you are telling a story visually and with the numbers. Now, the infographic at the left, I would say, falls short of this goal in several ways. First, I'm not sure who the audience is. Is it the customer? If so, are your customers interested in what the annual sales are at the market? Do you want to advertise the average spend per customer to customers? It kind of makes me feel like when I go to the market, I should try to only spend $18. Second, the graphic you use should in some way represent the number. The graphic of the car and bicycle is very good in this respect, because it gives you a clear sense that we're talking about bicycles, people who bicycle versus cars. But again, you see here, there's no context. I have no idea. I was actually, 8% sounds low to me, but I don't know their market. But if you look at the graphic in the upper right-hand corner, which to me looks kind of like a family tree or a crowd of people, I don't know what it has to do with the average miles from farm to market. And so when there's a disconnect between your graphic and the number, it doesn't make it easier to understand or remember. Finally, though, this infographic doesn't draw out the context or implication of the numbers presented. And so it becomes, in my mind, more of a list of fun facts than actually a story that's being told or that would be remembered by someone who's seen it. So that's a bit on infographics. And if you're interested in using infographics, if you just Google a search on free infographic icons, you'll find a lot of icons that you can pick from to create your own infographic. And if you are a member of the Farmers Market Coalition and are part of their data project, you have infographics that can be generated directly from that. Now, I'm going to end with one last example. Our market has done $26,000 in SNAP business. And while there are 28 farmers markets and food stands in Delaware, our market accounts for over 25% of the total SNAP dollars spent at markets and farm stands, and does more SNAP than any other market. Now, to spread the word that we accept SNAP, when we held our Kids Day at the market, we offered any child who came to the market with a SNAP recipient $5 in tokens to spend at the market. Now, when the first little boy was at the SNAP desk with his father who had an EBT card, and we had agreed that we would put the $5 of tokens directly into the child's hand, because the idea was that they were going to be able to pick a fruit or vegetable that they wanted to eat. So when the first little boy put out his hand and our volunteer put those $5 in tokens in his hand, he got a gigantic smile on his face. And then he looked up at his father and he asked, "Is this enough to buy a peach?" And our volunteer told him, "Oh, honey, it's enough to buy a whole little bag of peaches." He smiled again, and then he looked up wistfully and he said, "I've always wanted to know what a peach tastes like." Now, this is what we mean by a story that lives in your heart. And this is a story that had a great impact on our volunteers at that SNAP desk that day. Now, our messaging and our call to action, again, with this story varies by audience. On the right-hand side of the slide, I show the different messages we had for different audiences. For SNAP recipients, it was really just a message that at our market, come for the match. We want you to access fresh foods with your EBT card. For our volunteers, it was, you helped create this moment. This is part of the success that you create every day when you volunteer at the market. And we need you to help address hunger in our community. For City Council, it was, we're serving our community as a nonprofit organization. Now, one person we had the opportunity to share our data and stories with was our United States House Representative Lisa Blunt Rochester, who at the time just happened to sit on the Ag Committee. The Ag Committee was preparing a new farm bill to pass, and the SNAP program, as I think many of you know, is funded under the Farm Bill and was at risk for reductions in funding. And for the first draft of the bill, she urged a vote against the bill until a bipartisan agreement on funding could be reached. Now, you can imagine when out of the blue, we received an email with this press release and heard our story of a little boy and a peach being told in the House of Representatives. This is the kind of impact that you can have when you have compelling stories that can communicate the true value of your market. Now, I've tried to finish a bit early so we'd have both time for questions and then time to talk about COVID. Let me just first see if there are any questions. I think I've answered them all. Hal, do you see any other questions?
Maybe one that came to me privately. I think now it's there for everyone to see. Can you recommend resources to help us learn to use data better, like Nancy Duarte's data story, or how to tell stories better in our businesses and farms and markets?
Gosh, I can recommend a couple books. I think for us, I have to say what has worked best for us is just starting with some data and trying to identify stories. I see someone has added one resource here. Another resource, there's a book called The Best Story Wins. And I think lots of times you'll find that the most compelling story often wins the day. And this gets into a bit more about storytelling and how you can do it. Do other people, I see John Gentry has shared this. Do other people type in the chat box if you have resources that you found helpful to share? I should also say the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario has been doing something called, I don't know whether it was a contest they had. They do a lot of things where they have contests with farmers and farmers markets. But they've been having people submit stories on the impacts of climate change on their farm and on their farming practices. And they have a whole series of stories there. I'm going to ask Helene to unmute herself now, because if there aren't any more questions, thank you. I hope this has been helpful. And I hope you start sending us some stories from your markets. What we'll do now is transition to talk about COVID. And Helene, are you on?
I'm there. I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hello to everyone today.
I thought it might be helpful. First of all, let me introduce Helene. Helene's the president of the Historic Lewes Farmers Market. And when I described, the origins of our market 15 years ago, this was Helene's taking the lead and doing this. And I'm more of a Johnny-come-lately to the market. Helene has been involved with an organization we're a part of called CASA, Chesapeake Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture, which is a Maryland organization, and has worked with them to help create some guidelines around COVID-19. And I would say, Helene, you're I don't want to say you're living, breathing COVID-19, because I certainly hope you're not living or breathing it. But your days are certainly consumed right now with different Zoom calls, whether it's Pennsylvania or other areas, Zoom calls on COVID-19 and how farmers markets are responding. I should say, just as background, in the state of Delaware, we are currently on a shelter-in-place order, and at this point, we've been told farmers markets cannot open before May 15th, and at that point there'll be another decision taken. So let me turn it over to Helene. Helene, I thought it could be useful if you give a little bit of background on just kind of what you're hearing and where your thinking is going. And then people can type in the chat box questions, because I think there probably will be lots of questions on this.
Thank you, Nancy. we are one of the few states around us that have not been allowed to open our markets. Most states are looking at markets as essential for delivering food to their local community, and we also agree with this. However, I think in another hand, we are a little bit glad that there's been a pause, because it's allowed us to step back and really think about how to make our markets safe. And we're thinking that we can work out a model that actually perhaps could make our markets safer than going to the grocery store. We know that a lot of markets are really challenged in the social distancing and how many people can come to the market. What we are particularly focused on now, thinking that we're maybe not going to be able to open our markets, maybe even until the end of June. We don't know when we're going to be able to open our markets, is that we have to do a pivot, and basically where markets were very important as social meeting areas, that basically our market is now an essential service, in that we're looking at different drive-through models now. We've formed a work group that consists of a couple of crisis management people, some of our board, and a number of farmers from our market to talk about what kind of model is feasible moving forward. And we're also going to have a focus group later this week with some of our different types of customers to talk about if the model we're thinking about would work for them. What we're thinking about now, from a call we had yesterday, is that we are going to work with our different vendors so everyone who wants to can take pre-orders and process those pre-order payments. And there are lots of different ways to do that. Some of our vendors already have that capability. A few of our farmers are already selling on farm, as I assume a number of your farmers are, but because they're becoming overwhelmed on their farm by the response. And also they just don't have enough product at this point, and they won't have enough product. So what we're thinking about is actually moving our market from the park where it's located, which is sort of has a dead end through a residential neighborhood, to perhaps the high school or the parking lot of a restaurant that's closed in our community. And actually having farmers bring pre-orders to be distributed at that point, perhaps having also farmers bring maybe 1 or 2 CSA type boxes that if you haven't pre-ordered, you can pay for, and restricting greatly the amount of the access between the customer and the farmer. If you're pre-ordering, you're not even turning over a credit card or cash to a customer, and thinking that if you come to the market, we're going to ask you to try to bring exact change, make all the CSA boxes around the same price possibly, so that when the customer drives through, the farmer has the order, puts it in the trunk of the car. If it's pre-ordered, that's it. The car moves on. And if the customer wants to purchase a CSA box, there's a box that the farmer hands over. The customer just puts the money in the box. That's where we are now and what we're working on. And we hope to be able to develop this model in the next couple of weeks so that we can present it to the Secretary of Agriculture as a safe model, a different model, and see where we go from there. I think it's in some ways a processing challenge. I mean, I think you can imagine we have 35 vendors in our market. I don't think everyone would want to participate, but I think many would. So it's bringing everybody on board to help them be able to pre-order, and then thinking about how are we going to actually do the logistics of this as a pickup that makes it quick. I'm looking at, there's lots of different drive-through models that are coming that people are talking about. If you're a member of Farmers Market Coalition, you're probably seeing them. There was University of Ohio yesterday presented a couple of models. And so that's where we're thinking at this point, because we're quite concerned that this is not going to get better, that this situation is something that's going to remain with us maybe for a large part of the summer, we hope not, and that we have to have some way of getting local food from our farmers to help try to keep them in business and to deliver that food to the local community, which is desperate for produce. I mean, the produce has been intermittent in our stores, and we don't know what the impact is going to be from delivery to the supermarkets from California at this point, and from Texas. So that's where we're at. And so I just want to open it up. I'm really interested in different ideas that people have about creating markets where there's hardly any contact between the customer and the farmer.
I was just going to add, Helene, this is Nancy again. We've also seen in adjacent states some farmers markets that are, doing in-person farmers markets where they're limiting the number of people into the market, and they actually, because their farmers market is located in a paved parking lot, they draw with chalk circles that are at least 6 feet apart, and people wait in line, and you have to be standing in one of those circles. And then once someone a customer is taken, you move to the next circle, and everybody moves up a circle to maintain that 6 feet of separation.
I think that those are working in smaller markets, Nancy, where you don't have a lot of customers because you can control the crowds. One of the things we're seeing in different markets is that if you're allowing that many people in a larger market to come into the market, that people have a tendency to, it's hard to control the crowds as part of the challenge. I think that's a good solution for smaller markets. I'm not so sure it's a good solution for a larger market like ours.
Yeah, and the other thing is just about everyone is ensuring that the person who handles money does not handle food.
That's true. And the other thing that I've seen that's quite effective in markets that are open is if you just do something where you take one of your 6 by 3 or 6 by 4 foot tables, you put that in front of you. You don't put any product out on that table. You might put your price list on that table, and behind you, you have your produce, and it's bagged. So it's the contact goes down right away because the customer cannot get close to you, the vendor, the farmer, and they're never going to touch the produce. It's very important that we all start to look at how we've designed our actual layout, so there's also enough space between vendors, and also so it's very important, I think, that customers not be able to come in on your sides and actually touch produce, touch bags, or touch you in any way. I mean, to this point, people really love markets. They love to go and they love to chat with the farmer, and they love to shake hands and all of this. And all of that really needs to be changed for a while until we can go back to that at some point, we hope. There's a whole great list on futureharvestcasa.org that they've done on COVID safety on the farm and also in farmers markets.
And I think it's North Carolina or South Carolina Extension has the resource, Helene, that gives you information on kind of what products actually work in terms of COVID.
In terms of disinfectants?
Disinfectants, yes.
That's actually available on, what's the federal site? EPA products.
Okay.
And I think that's readily available, but those are the products. There are also suggestions that you don't supply bathrooms to the public if you have porta potties. Every market needs to have different types of washing stations and enough hand washing stations. You can do it in a very simple way, but you need to, like with a Cambro container, Cambro has attachment for the top of a Cambro container that has soap and a paper towel roll. And you could, and also the good thing about the Cambro is that when you turn the spigot on, you don't have to hold it. You turn it on, you turn it off. So the water flow goes on. You have to really, we're rethinking. We had our wash station set up with large igloo coolers, but you have to press the button down to wash your hand. And you need to think about all of these things. I mean, we really want to not only keep our customers safe, our volunteers safe, but we want to keep our farms and farmers safe.
Yeah. There's also an interesting article in the New York Times titled "Why Outdoor Farmers Markets Matter More Than Ever." Now I see I'm looking for questions here. There's interesting information shared by Alyssa Gant about a pre-order pickup system at her market.
I'm wondering how many customers they have.
Well, what she's saying is right now they're averaging 200 customers per market, and that their winter market typically averages 400 and some are 1,200.
And do they have any problems with customers coming at the wrong pickup time?
I'll let Alyssa answer that. I'll just share with everyone what they're doing is they have customers sign up for a pickup time slot and then place orders with vendors. And the day of the market, they come in during their designated time slots to pick up and leave with no money being exchanged. It's being paid, in advance by a credit card, I assume.
And the other question I have, is it drive-through, or what does this market actually look like? Are customers walking in and picking up their boxes?
She says, as of now, no issues. We've had a few that have showed up without a time slot, but less than a dozen drive-through.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. I'm curious on how are they doing pre-orders through their market central, or pre-orders go direct to their vendor?
I wonder if we can unmute Alyssa and hear from her.
I can certainly unmute.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So as of right now, what we are doing is we have a system that is set up through Sign Up Genius. And for every market day, we have a Sign Up Genius site that is designated with 10-minute time slots. We only have 10 slots available for each 10-minute time slot as per our government request. I'm in Connecticut, for those who are wondering. I don't know that if that rule applies to you guys, but right now, Connecticut farmers markets are being designated essentially as the same equivalent as a grocery store. So what we're doing is we're trying to get as many of our customers into the market as possible, but while also keeping social distancing standards as they should be. So basically we have people in the week before the market sign up on Sign Up Genius for a 10-minute time slot. We have a website that has a list of all of the vendors who are attending that day with their either email address, if that's how they prefer to receive orders, or their website, if that's how they prefer to receive orders. And then once people sign up for their time slot, basically they go right to the vendor, place their order, they get invoiced. Most of the vendors now, we've kind of helped them set up like either Square or some sort of processing system so that they're able to then just process orders right on like credit, debit, PayPal, whatever. And thus far, it's been working really smoothly. I see there's a few questions. Accessibility. So basically, the market in our area, I'm in New Haven, Connecticut, and it's a very urban area. We have a bus stop that's right in front of the location we're utilizing. It's actually our winter market location, which is a school, and it conveniently has a wraparound U-shaped parking lot, which is perfect for a drive-through. For customers that don't have vehicles, we're allowing them, if they have a time slot, to just sign up for the time slot, show up like anybody else would in a vehicle, pick up their groceries, and then leave immediately. We are making sure that we're having our farmers market managers enforce the rule of not letting people linger unless they're a vendor, because obviously we want to minimize contact between people. I also see how our markets who aren't allowing cash incentive dollars addressing SNAP. So I know for us, this program kind of makes SNAP, it makes processing SNAP difficult. We are a market like many markets that do SNAP matching. So right now, instead of using our token system to do our SNAP matching, we're actually basically halving the cost of produce orders up to $10 per day, which is what we usually double, to kind of make up for the fact that we're trying to avoid giving out tokens.
How are you having SNAP customers pre-order?
So basically, the way we're having SNAP customers pre-order is we're having them, like everyone else, sign up with Sign Up Genius to pick a time slot. And when they place orders with the vendors, we are having them also contact us and just let us know what their total is. And we double check all of this with the vendors beforehand. And once we know what their total is for produce, we are then able to calculate like how much it is halved at the market, and then we process the transaction that day at the market. That's the only processing of transactions that we're doing day of.
So you actually have your SNAP team set up at the market that day just to process the SNAP.
Yep, just for SNAP transactions. That's it. That's the exception to the rule because unfortunately, as we all know, SNAP can't be processed online. So the only exception in close contact anyone has is processing SNAP, and that's it.
Are you doing anything in terms of your SNAP machine? I've seen pictures where people have been doing things like put saran wrap between each time they process and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so basically, right now we have our machine is wrapped in a saran wrap sheet so that we are able to Lysol it down between uses, and so that like whenever someone's touching it, it's a sanitary surface for them to touch. And then I saw Ellie just asked about SNAP doubling. So usually when we do SNAP doubling, we will, for example, swipe $10 off of someone's EBT card, and they'll get up to $10 in doubling coins per day in addition to what they swiped off of their card. What we're doing right now, because we're trying to avoid the use of the wooden tokens, is we are basically, say they purchased $30 in produce, we will see that $30 in produce and we'll take $10 off per day of that produce order, to basically effectively give them the doubling money they would normally get without having to actually exchange coins, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And so I'm a little slow about this. How are you then reimbursing your vendors for SNAP?
So we had a very sophisticated kind of checkout system at the end of the market where we would have like cash out sheets,
right?
And everyone would write, we do a 6% daily gross. I think somebody else had mentioned using the 6% fee. So we do a 6% daily gross for market fees, and then we base whatever they make in tokens, we'll pull that fee from that and then reimburse accordingly. However, now we've switched over to a completely digital system, or or are attempting to. It's been a slow rollout, but we're using a website called FarmSpread. And we basically are working really closely with the website designer for FarmSpread, who is essentially creating a system for us to be able to do completely digital cash out. And we just piloted the program the beginning of this winter. So basically for cash out, all we need to know is from each vendor how much they had in SNAP transactions for that day. So whether it be like the $30 in produce or what have you from one person, they'll tell us their totals for the day just like they would in a normal cash out scenario. And then it's just done digitally.
Can we go back to this? I have a question about this Sign Up Genius.
Mhm.
Before you're allowing the customer to order, they have to get that time slot?
Yeah, so basically what we do is we have a weekly newsletter that goes out, and then we also have our website.
Yeah.
And in both the website and the weekly newsletter, we're posting the Sign Up Genius link. And so anybody who wants to sign up for our time slot can go into Sign Up Genius, and I can actually probably link our page here if you guys want to take a look at it.
Great.
Sign Up Genius. And basically what we're doing is we have the 10-minute time slots available. And we have people sign up. I'm going to link you guys an old one so you can see how it works. I linked it in the comments. And basically people can sign up with their name. They'll put in like what farms they're picking up from. So we have an idea of like how many farms they're visiting, if they're going to need the whole slot, if they're going to need a partial slot. And then as we see slots fill up, we have the capability of adding more slots. So our market generally runs 9 to 1. However, last week we ended up extending the market until 1:30 just so that we were able to get people in to the market to be able to pick up their products.
So are they allowed to order before they sign up for the time spot?
They are. So there's no particular order in which they have to do things in. They could totally go to the vendors first and then go to Sign Up Genius and pick a time slot. But going to Sign Up Genius first kind of facilitates the process because the vendor is going to ask them anyway if they have a sign up slot for picking up. And the vendors already are kind of tasked with asking them what time their pickup is so that they can anticipate when each person is coming.
What do you think your biggest challenges are in this, Alyssa?
I think right now our biggest challenge is going to be capacity. So like I said, right now we're averaging around 200 per pickup market. However, we're still at our winter market level capacity. When we're in our full season, we have around 30 vendors in our Worcester Square location. And like I said, we average around 1,200 customers per market in the height of the season. So right now we are in the midst of kind of speculating how this is going to evolve over time. We also have the trouble right now of we are waiting on city approval for our normal farmers market site because all permits are held up right now because of COVID.
Right.
So we're just kind of in this weird limbo of trying to figure out how the market's going to evolve over time. So as of right now, we're continuing at our winter market location in a drive-through format, but in a week, a month, this may evolve into something different. We may have to find a bigger location once we expand to more vendors. So it's constantly evolving, as I'm sure you guys understand.
Yeah, we're totally thinking that. We get around an average of 1,000 vendors in May, and then
1,000 customers.
Customers in May, and then from June through August, we can get 3,000 to 4,000 customers. So one of the things we've been thinking about looking forward is if we're still having to use this model, should we somehow break up our markets into satellite markets, have more than one location? because it's, at some point, you know, we're still being restricted to, let's say you know, you can go up in terms of how many people are in the space at one time, but maybe it's 50. How are you going to deal with that?
That's also something that we've contemplated. So our nonprofit runs 4 markets around the city of New Haven. And we've thought of ways in which we could turn our additional markets into satellite markets, because of the capacity issues we would have with our one large market. But yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
think about
what we all stay awake at night thinking about. How are we going to deal with? I think now, if we put this in, let's say that we start this in May, I can see that we would there's such demand that we could easily, I think, have 500 plus customers. And so that's part of what we're trying to think about, how to deal with that. And with you know, every one of us, I think, have restricted funds. I mean, we don't have a lot of reserves. We have some, but not to invest in, you know, it's hard to invest in totally new systems like this really quickly and make them work well. But this Sign Up Genius is a really great idea. I'm going to go, after I get off this call, and take a look at that.
Yeah, definitely do. We've found it's been immensely helpful. I had a question, I did answer it in the comments, but so far as I've seen from exploring Sign Up Genius, I don't think you can have a reoccurring time slot, because the way Sign Up Genius views these events, it views them as like a one-off event. So you can't have like a reoccurring event. Oh, somebody just answered and said that you can. But I agree. I think it would just be a hassle. I think that the concern would be having somebody sign up for a reoccurring time slot that ends up not showing and taking up that time slot for somebody who's actually going to come to the market. So just something to put on your radar and think about.
At your market, when you're administering this, when you're managing this, how many how much market staff do you need to have there?
So right now we are, like everybody else, I'm sure, trying to minimize the amount of people we have at any given market. So right now we're asking that our vendors only have 1 worker per stand, if possible. And then for our market in itself, we have 1 market manager who is paid. And then we also have a minimum of 2 volunteers. And basically that's just for traffic control, getting people checked in, and kind of explaining the drive-through to them, before they kind of proceed through and pick up their stuff. But I could definitely see that as the market potentially grows, we'll need at least 3-4 volunteers to be able to handle the capacity, the amount of customers, traffic control, etc.
How many vendors do you have now selling in that market, in the drive-through?
Currently, on any given weekend, we have between 10 and 12 selling. But it kind of fluctuates on a week-to-week basis, because in Connecticut, as I'm sure it is in Delaware, it's kind of a weird interim time of year. Nothing's really growing right now. So the produce vendors that we have mainly are selling like limited products. So it's kind of, it fluctuates on a week-to-week basis what's available.
And do you have protein vendors in that mix?
We do. We have meat vendors, we have dairy vendors, we have produce, we have honey. So we try to get a nice mix of everything. We have bakeries as well.
Have you thought of encouraging your vendors to perhaps band together in some way to limit the amount of orders, making the orders larger?
We have. We've actually kind of talked to them, both vendors and customers, about this. We've tried, we have a bunch of vendors who come from the same areas. So basically the northwest corner of Connecticut and the northeast corner are the main agricultural areas. And so like we're probably about a 50-50 split in vendors that come from each area. So we've talked to farms that are close to each other to see about them collaborating, bringing each other's products to the market and doing like alternating weeks so that we don't have to worry about like the same vendor being exposed over and over again to large groups of people. Right now, it's not been actuated because we've only been doing this system for about 2 weeks. But I think that if this becomes long-term, which it likely will, we will push them to actually start utilizing a system where they're like splitting the time that they're at the market. We've also talked to customers who are willing or able to pick up for their neighbors who aren't able to come out for whatever reason, if they're at risk, if they're elderly. So that way they're taking up less time slots and exposing less of the at-risk population. And we've actually had quite a few customers take advantage of that. We probably have about 8 people on our sign up for this coming weekend that are picking up for additional people as well.
So do they get the same time slot?
Yep. And they'll just say, I'm picking up an order for XYZ and I'm picking up an order for ABC. And they'll get both persons' orders and then they bring it to that person.
So is each vendor then is, as you drive through, is saying like, so is it working like the customer drives up to the particular vendor and says, I'm, you know, Nancy Smith and I have an order with you, and then the vendor puts it in the trunk of their car? Is that how that's working?
Yep, exactly like that. So basically they'll drive up, we have the vendors all in alphabetical order, and they'll drive through the circle. They'll pull up to a vendor that they ordered from. We have it luckily so that there's enough room for them to be able to pull around if they need to skip vendors that they didn't order from. They'll say, my name is so-and-so and I ordered this, or just give their name. Generally, they'll have a list of what everyone ordered. And then we have it set up so that the vendors have a pickup table on the, like in the front that's completely empty, so it's easily sanitized. They just place the order on the pickup table if the person's okay picking it up themselves. If not, they'll just put it right in the trunk of their car. And then they just carry on through the market, pick up the rest of their stuff and head on their way.
So no one's had an automobile accident in the market. It's like, it's so funny that we're just, everything we just hate, we're having to look at again. Like,
I know. Knock on wood. No, we have not had any automobile accidents yet.
Right.
Luckily, everybody's been really cautious and very conscious of their surroundings, which is wonderful.
Wow. Well, I think that the issue for all of us is going to be the ramping up. That's going to be the next challenge, but I'm thinking we might very well still be operating like this in the summer. And hats off to you guys for thinking about this. What you've had, like, this Sign Up Genius thing is really, really interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad we can share it with you guys. I'm hoping that more people start to take advantage of it because it's a great system, and thus far it has worked really well for us. And like you said, it's going to be an evolution to see how this continues into the summer months, but I think that it has the potential of working. It's just going to be a lot of brainstorming on how to get it to work.
Yeah, I think everyone is struggling now to develop systems. Now, we also have some comments here, and I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce the name right or whether this is like 2 names pushed together. Angelm, about what you've been doing at your market, and I wonder if you should unmute and we should hear a little bit from you in terms of your first hour being designated as 55 or plus, and then how you're spacing it out. But actually, it sounds like you're still having people move, physically move from stall to stall, if I'm reading this correctly.
Yes, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Okay, good. Yes, we are still open and allowing people into the market area. I am actively monitoring everything out there. I'm kind of a one-man show, and we are a smaller market at this time. Normally this time of the year, we would be running around 15 vendors. We are a food-only producers only market. We don't have any crafts or anything like that. So at this time, our space is too small to allow people to be able to like drive through and do pickups like that. Several of our vendors, and particularly those who are not coming, are over 60. And so the market is smaller right now. Last week we had 6 vendors, and we had opened up the first hour to a 55 plus only, or those with health issues only. And that worked really well. There were people that came that were just so grateful that we had reserved a time for them. We see a lot of retail stores that are doing that, giving a special designated hour. And then we still had 2 hours after that that was open to the entire public to come through. We are strongly encouraging pickup and pre-order options. Many of our vendors have Square. I'm sure many of y'all's do as well. And that with Square, you can do curbside pickup, you can do pickup scheduling. So I'm encouraging my vendors that have Square to use those options and to make their products online through their web store that is a free service through Square. We do have vendors using other processing mediums to accept payment. Most of our vendors do accept cards, but we do have some that are just, you know, farmers that don't have internet access, do not have the ability to do any kind of prepayment, but we're encouraging them to at least email and do a pre-order to try to expedite their time at market and move people through quickly. But we have double spaced all of our booths now to make sure that there is, you know, about a 10-foot space right now between each booth since we've doubled them. We did have a 10 by 10 booth next to each other, but double spacing it has spaced them out more. We have marked with chalk the lines that people need to be separated by 6 foot if they're waiting to get to a vendor. We are keeping hand sanitizer at every booth. We're keeping bleach wipes at every booth and just trying to maintain wiping those surfaces down. Some of our vendors have turned their 6-foot table around long way, so they are at one end and they have like a cash drop-off container on the other end, and they just slide the product to the person puts the money in their can, and there's no exchanging of money if they can't accept credit cards. Some of them are doing that. But the main thing that I'm doing is trying to visually keep an eye on how many people are in the market at a given time, and are they maintaining the 6-foot spacing. When I make an announcement over the PA system and I say, thank you for understanding, let's maintain our 6-foot spacing, keep social distancing, immediately those who have forgotten step back. So everybody's been very compliant and had a good attitude. And at this time, things are flowing smoothly for us. But of course, foot traffic is down as people are staying home. But we feel that as a local food source, food is a priority. We are considered an essential business, and so we intend to stay open and not abandon our community when they need us the most. I'm trying to remind people that an open air market is a good option. It's better potentially than being in an enclosed retail store. You're outside in the fresh air. UV rays have been demonstrated to destroy the virus on surfaces quickly. So that is a good option, that we are out in the sun, and that products that they are receiving are coming directly from the farm that grew or raised them, rather than going through a food chain with unknown numbers of people that may have handled it. So at this point, our customers are still coming, and we are going to remain open, and these are the options that we are giving them. But we cannot do the drive-through pickup, which is great, and we commend those people that are able to do that. I think we all just have to figure out what will work best for us and try to be as safety-minded as we possibly can be.
Thank you. You know, I think this point about open air markets is important. I think there are 2 points that make us so concerned about trying to keep the market going. One is, I don't know if any of you have been to shop in a grocery store lately, but it can be challenging to maintain 6 feet and social distancing. And secondly, we're hearing more concerns long run about maintaining the whole food supply chain as countries in the southern half of the hemisphere get hit this summer with this. So we're concerned that we are able to make sure that we continue to provide fresh local food. And could you didn't mention where your market's located?
Oh, my apologies. We are in Ottawa. We're outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. We're in the greater Chattanooga, Tennessee region.
Thank you. I think that's helpful for folks. Any other people who would like to share some ideas or what you're doing or what you're considering to do? If we just get one person at a time unmuting, I think we could manage this. Any final questions or any final comments, Helene?
I had to unmute myself. I'm so thankful that everybody's sharing, as we always do as farmers market managers and volunteers, and I appreciate it. Appreciate all the good thoughts. I think it's going to be challenging, but I think everybody who's on this call, on this webinar, really feels that we need to keep farms going, and we've worked so hard to keep this sustainable structure, to create it and to grow it. And I think it's a time when our local communities really need us the most. And I just appreciate everybody who's out there, who's taking some risk every day to open up markets. And thank you all, and want to, stay in communication with all of you. And we'll try to share as much as we found out. I'm sure we're going to make mistakes and we're going to have different challenges, but I think farmers markets are always very resilient, as are farmers. And so I think we're all going to get through this, and we're going to learn a lot from each other.
Hal, I know that a lot of things have been captured in the chat, and I'm not sure how that's being how that can be made available to people. It's been very helpful that John Gentry has been posting links, etc. Is there a way that we can get the chat contents to people?
Well, the easiest thing, the best way is if they could make a copy of the chat box now before we stop recording the webinar. I will have access to the chat box later and could send that out to folks if they would like to have it, if they want to email me at hal.pepper, hal.pepper@utk.edu. But I will leave I'll leave this up long enough for everybody to make a copy of it. I see John has posted there to click the 3 dots next to file in the chat box so you can get that and copy it. That's going to be the best way for you to get it quickly. So I'll leave this up until everybody's had a chance to make a copy of that.
That's great. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Helene, for sharing this information today in this webinar. I think it's been a really a good one, good information shared, and I thank everybody who's chimed in with comments. It's really made this into a very good webinar session, and we hope everyone will join us tomorrow when we learn about food safety rules for food manufacturers from Mike Brown with the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. So again, we appreciate everyone being with us today, and ask once again, if you would please complete the brief online evaluation in the chat box. That will help us as we are able to report impacts from this webinar series. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Hal. Hey.